action is the key. And like what you said about the catalyst, like there is definitely something there where, it starts as something and then it moves to something else and it moves to something else. Like I just found every time I learned something new, I wanted to learn the next thing and the next thing. And I wanted to know the next step. And
because many people will say things like, you got lucky, or, that you got lucky, right? But if you really think about it, luck is to some extent a formula, because you wouldn't get lucky unless you put in the work to get to that point, right? If you didn't clean up your act, if you didn't start writing down your goals, if you didn't start thinking differently, you would have never even capitalized on that luck in the first place.
heard that, it bothered me because I was like, I realized when I heard that and I didn't like it. I was like, I do want to have a plan for my life. I want to take control of my destiny. And that was really where, like, like master your destiny. That was really what it was all about. And that's when I started to, move towards that. Then that just became like, I just felt like I was in control of, like the journey.
Hey friends, you're tuned in to the Learn or Be Learned podcast, a show where wisdom meets curiosity in order to discover the human experience. I'm your host, Shiva D, and remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Now, let's get back to the show.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another great episode here on Learn or Be Learned. Today's guest is Scott Allan, all the way from Japan, which is incredible. Thank you, Scott, for being here. I'm so glad you're on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So, Scott, before we jump into some of the conversations I'm excited about, regarding your mindset and advice on personal growth and such, can you share a little bit about your backstory and how you got to where you are and maybe why you're in Japan?
Yeah, that might be a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. Let's see. I'll tell you a little bit, first of all, what I do right now. So I am an author, entrepreneur, content creator, and a couple of other things. But first and foremost, I am a writer. I think I've published about 35 to 40 books in the last decade. So building out a platform there. And aside from that, though, probably just, course creation. I do coaching as well. I coach people on how to write and publish books. And I'm not a life coach, but I do get asked a lot to coach people. So I do. And love doing interviews. So, love communicating with people. That's probably one of my strengths, I think. Leading into just, yes, I've been in Japan for about 25 years. And the first 20 years that I was here, I was teaching business English. So I'll give you a little bit of a backstory into how I got here, and then we can transition into some other questions. But I am from Canada originally, and way back in probably 96, 97, I was going through this period in my life where I wanted to make some changes, I think, in my mindset, the way I was living my lifestyle. All these things had to change, basically, because I was just not really, I felt anyway at the time I wasn't going anywhere, or I felt like I could be going somewhere that was just, I wanted to live a much greater life than I was at the time. So
and how old were you around this?
I was probably, I'm about 54 now. I was probably about 26, 27 at the time. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was one of these types that really loved to just live hard, be out every weekend, work hard as well. I never missed a day's work. But when the weekends came, I was always out there, I did a lot of drinking and partying and things like that. And that was just my lifestyle. And I enjoyed it for a while until I didn't. And I decided to, or I had to give it up after I had a couple of warnings from the doctors. They said, if you keep this up, you might not see 30. So,
wow.
Yeah. And that didn't actually scare me, though. It was more like continuing on this landslide where if I had continued that way, I was probably going to end up living a very long time and not living very well. And that probably disturbed me more than anything. But what I found is that once I started to clean things up, and I got some help from some mentors, they got me doing things like, writing out my goals and things like that. And I'd never really done those kinds of things before, which I guess now we would call it personal development. But, back then, it's just when I was first introduced to a couple of books on, we'll call them self-help books. I thought they were great. I think one of them was by Jim Rohn, and the other one was by Tony Robbins, Waking the Giant Within. Someone gave me the book, and I still have the book. And I took that book home, and that just changed my life because, first of all, it's a big book. So if you ever read it, it's a few hundred pages, but it's about 30 years old now, but it was just a gem. But anyway, what happened is I read the book, started outlining my goals in detail. And I think in the book, it said, make a vision board. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. So within a few days, my entire apartment was decorated with, positivity quotes and pictures of places I wanted to go. And I just felt like inside I could feel something changing. Like for the first time in my life, I had a vision for something that it had never happened before. And what was even more powerful about this is that I felt as if I was creating my future by putting this vision board up on the wall. And, I was doing journaling and all these things. So I spent probably about a year planning out my dream. And so what it was, when I wrote up my goals, I had 3 things. And one of them was I wanted to become an author. And that's been a dream since I was 12 years old. So that never changed. And the second one was I wanted to travel the world, which was a new one because I'd never really been anywhere before. So getting on a plane and going, coming to Japan wasn't the plan to begin with. I was just going to get on a plane and go to Thailand. That was actually the plan. And the third one is I just wanted to become a better human being. And there was a lot of other goals, but they were kind of like, walk the Great Wall of China and a whole bunch of other kind of like bucket list, right, things. But those 3 things, though, I looked at those 3 things. I'm like, okay, well, the third one's going to be like a lifelong journey. So that's fine. The first one might take a while, but the second one, I thought I could do that one in about a year. But it meant giving up everything and, traveling overseas. And that concept, like that vision of doing that, just for about 5 seconds, it scared me. And after that, it became everything to me. I just became like, it was like the beacon, the North Star. And everything I did was geared towards traveling around the world, and didn't have any money. So I had a good job, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I can save up a bit and do this thing. But the most important thing, and the thing I want everyone to take away from this, is that the most important thing is I made a decision that I was going to do it no matter what. And I never changed my mind about that. So anyway, what happened is a few months later, after making the decision, I'm kind of leafing through the newspaper back when we had newspapers. We still do. And I never read the newspaper. So that's the other thing is like, I just picked up the newspaper. My roommate brought it home, threw it down on the table. I picked it up one day, opened it up, but literally just opened it to the first page because I usually look to see what's playing in the movies. And right there was an advertisement for teaching English in Japan. And it said, teach English in Japan, apply now. And I thought, well, I'm going that ways anyway. Why not? So I remember like I spent like a couple of days, typing up a really good resume, nice cover letter, and I just shipped it off. And I think it was like 2 weeks later, they contacted me, said, come down to, we want to meet you in Vancouver. They gave me the address, and 2 weeks later, I'm in this really nice hotel in downtown Vancouver, having dinner with this Japanese businessman who owns a business school in Japan. And he said, we're hiring like 3 people to go over there. We fly you over. And they had like, 100 applications or something. So I thought, well, okay, I don't have a degree in education. I'm not sure. And that wasn't a requirement, but it would have helped.
Right.
But anyway, long story short, had the interview, and they called me back a few days later and said, we picked 3 people and you were number 4. So you didn't get the job. I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to change my mind. I'm still going over to Thailand or Vietnam, and that was my plan. Right. But I think the next day they called me back and said, the third guy dropped out. So you're in. So that was it. So I was in, I had my ticket. Destiny was calling me. It said like, this is part of the plan. So I just went with it. And I probably had about 6 months to prepare for that. So the thing about this whole thing though, is that it wasn't just, some people said, well, you got really lucky. And I think that might've been part of it, but I also set this whole thing up. And when I started to look back later on, like years later, I would look back on this, and I still do. And I was connecting the dots, and I was like, okay, well, first thing is, I decided to like clean up my act. And then I found a really good book and a mentor, and I started to connect all these things. And, I got better. And then I realized what I wanted. And once I realized what I wanted, then something else showed up to give it to me. And there's just like this series of dots that just were lining up, and
Yeah.
that's the thing is like, if I had not made a decision to go overseas and travel, and I could have that day, I would have opened up the paper. I wouldn't even seen that ad. It just would have, flipped by.
Right.
So anyway, that was it. I came to Japan in '98, and when I came, I think I already knew I was just fascinated by it. I didn't know anything about Japan. I didn't speak the language. Could barely hold a pair of chopsticks, and just got off the plane and had a job lined up here. So it was great. The company just put us up on a homestay, gave us a car. I doubled my salary overnight, and I was working half as much. So I was like, this is pretty good. And
Yeah.
anyway, I just stayed and, loved the culture, did a lot of traveling. I eventually did make it to Thailand and all these places on vacations, but that was great. This was my home base. And it was just it's been a great journey. Learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes,
Yeah.
failed a few times, and I'll leave it at that. And just in case you have any follow-up questions, but that is the short version of a very long story.
Wow. That's incredible because, first off, love Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn's. It always seems to be there's some sort of catalyst that starts somebody's journey, whether it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or reading or watching Tony Robbins, and some sort of, catalyst there. But I love the point you made about luck, because I think that's an interesting topic, because many people will say things like, you got lucky, or, that you got lucky, right? But if you really think about it, luck is to some extent a formula, because you wouldn't get lucky unless you put in the work to get to that point, right? If you didn't clean up your act, if you didn't start writing down your goals, if you didn't start thinking differently, you would have never even capitalized on that luck in the first place. And then there's the other side of the coin where, someone could say, well, then how would you explain, somebody winning the lottery? That's lucky. But in my opinion, I don't even think that's lucky, because if you look at anybody that wins the lottery, they often lose everything, if not more, because they weren't, that type of person prepared to handle that kind of change in their life. So in my opinion, it's the way you take it. If they had the right mindset, then it was a good life lesson. But in general, I wouldn't consider that lucky. I think luck is some sort of formula, whatever that may be, but it requires you to put in the work behind the scenes that I don't think many people see day to day. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's exactly. That's great, because I think a lot of people see the result, like somebody who's been working for 5, 10, 20 years, and, suddenly you maybe have this success, and that's what people see. And they're like, oh, well, he got there because he got an inheritance and he had all this money to begin with, when in fact that wasn't the truth. Maybe he started with nothing, and just stuff like that. Like, people come up with a lot of, I don't know, they make up things that they want to believe because maybe they feel like they can't get there, even though they may want to. So, but yeah, you have a point there about the, I like with the lottery ticket winners, for example. They may lose everything afterwards. And also, in order to win the lottery, you have to buy a ticket. So you have to at least do that much. And some people have to buy 1,000 of them, So,
right. Right.
But,
it requires action behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. The action is the key. And like what you said about the catalyst, like there is definitely something there where, it starts as something and then it moves to something else and it moves to something else. Like, I just found every time I learned something new, I wanted to learn the next thing and the next thing. And I wanted to know the next step, and gradually started moving away from this version of myself, this identity that I like. The further away from it that I got, the less I wanted to, I just wanted to be, put it in my past and say, I'm not going back to that guy again, because he had his day and he's done. So, we're going to build this new version. And that just became the catalyst for anything. And there was a point in my life where actually I did go back to that old way of living again, and almost ruined and destroyed everything, but got back on the horse again. And, sometimes you have to go, you have to fall back a few steps. Right. And I did that a couple of times too. And when I actually crawled back out of it again, and things got even better after that, it made me more I had a lot of gratitude for, the direction that I was going then, because I realized again and again, I really don't want to go back to that way of life, because it's just going to take everything. So, but yeah, there's, you have to have, I think, mentors and people that, whether, reading books is great, but also, however you are, like whatever it is that you want to achieve in life, you're going to learn this from somebody, right? And sometimes it could just be one thing you hear from someone. It could be something you read in a book, something you see in a or hear on a podcast, or it could be an event that you attend, right? But you're going to pick up something, and if it sticks, you may want to be, you're curious enough to see, well, what could happen if I actually took action on this thing, and sometimes it just has to be the next little step in the next little step. And again, just back to something, I think Tony Robbins or Jim Rohn said this maybe, but the true measure of success is progress. And that's just the one thing. That's how I like to keep things simple. Like, I'm always moving forward. Not always. I mean, sometimes I'll slow down and take a breath, which we have to do. But there's always something that's just pushing me forward, because if progress is the name of the game, I always want to be moving forward, even when I'm up against a lot of resistance, which is going to happen on the journey, So.
Right. And I think a key point you said here is the ups and downs of life, right? Especially, I think, the start when you get into this space, you expect it to be an uphill, straight. Now that you're working hard, it's always going to be up from here. But sometimes you fall lower than where you started just to pick yourself up to the next apex, right? To get to that next level. It's you almost have to see what rock bottom again is like. And you're like, nope, that's not it. And even in my own personal experience, when you go and revert to your old ways, it almost doesn't resonate anymore with like who you've become. You have this dissonance where it's like better, so it's not even feeling as good as it once did, because you were, I guess, maybe in an ignorance state where you didn't know better. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that happened to me a couple of times. And so I mean, I battled with like alcohol for a long time, and that was pretty much my thing, right? So when I went back to it after like 3 or 4 years of not having any of it, and that was, like during those 4 years, that's how I got to Japan. That's how I was able to land a successful job and a career and everything. And then to go almost destroy all of it by going back to that. And then you're right. Like now I was back at rock bottom again going, I've been here before, and it's actually worse than it was last time, And so after a year of that, I was like, nope, not doing this anymore. So I got more help again, got more invested in that, climbed out of that again. And I think I went back one more time. And after that, I was like, no, not doing this again. And that was probably a good 15 years ago. And now, like, I couldn't even imagine it. But having said that, I realized that, for anybody who's like, it doesn't matter whether you're in recovery or you're just trying to change your life or change your identity. Like, it's once you move away from the identity of yourself that, like you're done with that identity because it no longer serves your purpose, right?
Right.
Then you become something else. You try to go back to that, and like what you just said, it doesn't resonate with the new you. It's just like you know it, you can feel it. You're back to where you were. You're like, I don't want to be back here. It's kind of like, I don't know, moving out of an old house and into a new one. You go back to the old house because you want to relive those old memories, and it's not the same place anymore.
Right.
Someone else is living there. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a moving forward type thing, right?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people that are starting in this journey that perhaps maybe feel this sense of procrastination, or they can't get that momentum to build? I think that's the hard part, right? Because you said, and I've seen this countless times, progress is the goal. That's where you see the compound growth, where eventually something clicks and you start hitting those bigger goals that you had set as well, like traveling and such, right? There's that compound growth to your goals, but the hard part, in my opinion, is that momentum, that initial resistance. I think is where most people can't break through. So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, like a lot of people don't actually have goals, and we can actually we can take the word goal. We could I've been using the word project lately, and really one of the same things. But it's like I have projects that are leading me towards my bigger goals or goal. I think, but I think that to start with, a lot of people don't have a goal that actually scares them. And when I mean scares them, it's like, what would happen? Like, what's going to happen? There are two things. What will happen if I do not achieve this goal? Like, think of something you really, really want. And for me, by the way, it was actually like, yeah, traveling was one thing, and I did that, but it was actually writing books and being an author. And I really wanted that. But then I created I had an anti-vision for that as well. And you really have to sit down and think this through, like just spending time with yourself. You don't have to meditate if you don't mean. I do meditate 15, 30 minutes, 60 minutes a day. But for me, like the meditation is more like it's creative visualization, where I'm actually visualizing the future that I really want for myself, so that I can create the emotion that is needed. I can put that in the future, and then that moves me forward, and I'm probably quoting Joe Dispenza here, because I watch a lot of his stuff, and I just love the way that he frames all that up. He frames it up better than I did, but that's the idea behind that, right? Now, there's also the anti-vision of, okay, I really want this thing, but what's going to happen if I don't get it, right? So, for example, if I don't take action today, I'm not going to be able to become a great piano player, or whatever it is that you want. That's not going to happen. So imagine your life, 10, 20, let's say 20 years from now, you're still doing the same thing, still stuck in the same situation. And it might be a year from now. I mean, actually, I think it's better to make that time shorter, because it's hard for us to relate to something that's really far away. But I mean, if you're stuck in a situation you really want out of it, imagine you're still there 1 year from now, right? And now look at that situation. Imagine what that feels like. Now bring yourself back to the present moment. Think, okay, I know what I want. And if you don't know what you want, spend some time journaling it out. At least come up with something. It doesn't have to be your definitive purpose in life, because that changes too, right?
Right.
Just has to be something that you're like, I've always wanted this thing, and I can still get it. And make a list of the small steps that you can start to take. So that's what I did, is like, okay, I want to write a book. Here's what I need to do. I need to come up with an outline. I just made like a list of things I needed to do. And there weren't that many. It's like, I just broke them down into small chunks. And every day I would just work on a piece of it. I work on a piece of it. You keep showing up every day and working on a piece of it every day. That's really like, I think that's my, probably my journey would be just a series of like doing a lot of these little pieces every day. And some days it would be an hour, some days it would be 3, and just be like whenever I could get the time. But that's the key, is like, you have to show up, put in the time, know what you want, be okay with, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail a little bit or a lot, but you're eventually going to get there. Like, I do believe that if you really are all in on this thing, then something is going to show up to give you help. Like, that's been my experience, and other people that I've worked with. Like, we talked about, lucky. Well, you have to be ready for the lucky bus when it comes around, because if you don't have a ticket for that bus, you're not getting on it. But that's the thing, right? Is like, people say, they call me lucky because I wrote a few books and they've been successful. And it's like, well, yeah, but it was luck, kind of. But I mean, I created a lot of it from the beginning when I had to have a book out there, first of all, and then another one, another one. So eventually momentum, which is really powerful, momentum kicked in. And when that started, it turned my passion into an obsession. So I'm just saying, I won't get too off track with that. I can really go deep with that. But for anyone who's just starting out, I think the procrastination and the resistance comes with just, trying to figure out the outcome. And all you really need to do is just figure out what's the one thing I can do today or tomorrow, and then make a list of those things. And every day, just do one thing on that list. Right. But you have to have clarity. Like, clarity is in like, what's my next move? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you don't need to know the outcome, because we don't really know what the outcome is going to be. Like I said, I wanted to travel around the world and do all these things. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be getting on the plane. So really my goal was just to get to the airport, like that was it, and there's just like a series. I think I had to get the visa, and then I had to, get to the airport. And when I did finally get to the airport, by the way, I had forgotten my passport. That was another.
Wow. The one where you went to Japan?
Yes, that was the one. I almost didn't get on the plane. Yeah. I left it at a friend's house, and back then we didn't have cell phones. I couldn't just ring him up and say, you've got to bring my passport. And luckily, He was home and he realized it was on the table and he raced like half hour to the airport, handed it to me
Wow.
just as we're boarding. I mean,
I mean,
it
talk
was just
about like the universe
this,
kind of putting it for you, right? It's like, no,
yeah,
you're not staying here. You're going.
yeah, it's some wild stuff. But those are the things that happen, right? Like it's like I
Yeah.
look back now and I'm go like sometimes like I kind of forgot about these things for a while. Then when I start looking back again at the dots, it's like, wow. And I would recommend anybody just to look back and if you're feeling like regret or you're feeling like you know you you're not measuring up to the person that you want to be, just go back and look at the things that you have achieved, right? I think we look at the things that we failed at and we stick to those, and it's like, oh yeah, I really want to do that thing, but I was never very good at, so I gave it up. I mean, and maybe that wasn't the thing that were supposed to do anyway, but just come back to the present moment. That's all you've got is today, and all you've got is right now. So yeah.
Right.
So, and that's probably just like the last thing too. Like, I don't hold on to the past and go, oh, I wish I'd been this and that. I mean, sure, there are things that I wish I had done, but I mean, we can't do everything either. Even Michael Jordan didn't play baseball for very long. He was still a basketball player, but he gave it a
Right.
shot.
Right.
So
That's definitely something I struggle with is there's so many things I want to do, but you kind of have to filter it and say, okay, what do I know? Because there's only so many directions you can go, roughly give or take. If you look at Malcolm Gladwell's rule of 10,000 hours, the outlier book, right? There's only so much you can do in a 5 to 10 year span to master something. So that, in a lifetime, depending on even when you start, that gives you maybe a good 3, 4, 5 things that you can truly become very good at and that you love to do in your lifetime. So
yeah.
that's saying like you just said, you can't just jump from basketball to baseball without that hours of input, the next 5 to 10 year investment. So not to mention it, I think sports is also a little different because of the age, right? You just your body's wear and tear over time. But I love the topic you're talking about with goals and starting small and just, kind of building that compound growth. I think that's the only way to get the momentum is just taking one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I wanted to mention, I think a good framework that I think about is, like you said, right, when you got on that plane, you weren't 100% certain what's happening next. So it's kind of hard to determine the next goals and stuff, maybe even for a small period of time. But I like the framework of creating like a vision and then goals under that vision. So the goals can change, the vision's still consistent, and then, maybe differentiate it even to more sub things like projects and stuff. But that's where I wanted to ask you, what was that differentiator between goals and projects you had mentioned earlier?
Yeah, well, I think like with the vision board anyway. So recently I created a new one as well. I didn't have one for a long time, and I have a new mentor, and I think like the first or second session we had, he's like, well, I told him about the vision board story. He's like, "Do you have one now?" Because I was kind of feeling, lately, kind of, wasn't sure my direction. If was I moving in the right direction, or kind of felt or disorganized, confused. So he's like, "Make that vision board again." And I made 3 of them, and they just kept getting better every time I did. I used a lot of, I printed everything out in color too, so I used a lot of ink. But the thing is, like 10, 15 minutes before bed, I'll actually just sit in front of this and look at it, and I'll look at ways I can make it better. Like, oh, I should have this and this and this. So I still do that, and I didn't do it for a long time, and I really got off track. And I did not have my goals. I had my goals all kind of all over the place because could be an ADHD thing, but I have them up on my wall and sticky notes and stuff like that. So, but yeah, the differentiator though, like I think with the between like the vision connects to your goals, but you don't have to have a vision board, of course, to make it happen. I mean,
Right.
maybe you just want to journal everything out, and I think that's really important, is that you just get it out of your head onto something, onto paper, or if you're into illustrations and drawing, make illustrations about it, whatever it is. Like, make storyboards. I know someone who just made their own storyboards about their journey, and that's what they used. So it doesn't matter how you do it, just do whatever works for you. Maybe you do want to line up a bunch of sticky notes, and that's great too. Like I find, but having something visual Not, I mean, yeah, sure. There's a, computer software we can use, and you can use Pinterest, and I've seen people do it that way, and that's good. But I think there's also something very creative about just, making these things and bringing them into the physical space. And it just felt very real to me, when I was making it. And, but also spending time with it as well, so I'd recommend that one of the things that I do every morning is I'll have my 3 goals for the week, the month, and the year. Like I'll have those written out in my journal, and I'll read over those, every day. And then I've got my big goal that I have, which is, that's like where everything's kind of moving towards that. But all these things are, lining up. And again, this wasn't something that just happened overnight. I continued to refine them again and again and again, and just did a lot of journaling. I have journals like, you can buy those for like, less than $10 on Amazon or at your local bookstore or something. So just pick up a line journal. And and again, I do most of my writing on the computer. So I actually like to take a break from that and just spend time like journaling and thinking things through, taking time out to just think through the process. And when you think through the process, you start to connect everything in your mind as well. And that's where you actually get a lot of clarity, and sure, there could be a lot of, there's a lot of stuff up there. Maybe you have a lot of thoughts about things you need to do and plans you have to make and this and that. But if you sit with yourself long enough and just kind of think through, the process of, not just, it's not just about what I want, but like, if I can help other people get what they want, like what kind of impact would that have? Like how many people could, if I help one person and that person helps 5 people and that person helps 10 people, like that's kind of how I think, is like 100 years from now, who knows what impact your actions are going to take. Because I used to think, okay, like it's all about my goals and it's all about me. And so, but I started to think bigger, and then I started to change. And that's when I started to have more like deeper gratitude sessions with myself. So
that's awesome. I've never really sat down and thought about the almost snowball effect that you're talking about, right? You help one person who helps a couple people, and that just creates this massive snowball effect where when you sit down and think about it, it's like, okay, well, my actions do make a difference. Maybe not to me, maybe not today, but there is an effect over time, good or bad, and that's, completely up to you in your lifetime to make. I have a friend, and before I even got into this personal growth development space, he had vision boards before it was my time to start jumping into this stuff. And I remember looking at his board and he had this guy with abs, and I was like, what's this? He was telling me about the vision board. And the funny thing is this picture of abs have been on his vision board for several years, and he never really shot for it, right? He never went for it. So, I'm curious to ask you about that, because it's not just enough to desire it, correct?
Correct,
wanting something isn't enough. So what is that other side of the coin here that we're missing?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll tell you what's on my vision board: a picture of the Wolverine. He's pretty cut, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, but when I put it up there, it's funny. Like my mentor was like, he goes, "That's pretty good." He goes, "You don't look like this yet, but what's the plan to get there?" And I realized, like, yeah, to your point, I have a desire to get into better shape or great shape, but the plan to get that way. So what I did is I went online and I started, researching like what's the Wolverine diet and what was his exercise like and stuff like that. And I started putting, because I've been working out for years, but it's like I want to get to the next level.
Right.
And so I started to put together a plan. And so I actually stopped. I cut out sugar. I would say about 80% now, probably. And I used to like consume chocolate bars and ice cream like every day. It was just like a daily
I bet
thing.
Japan has amazing snacks.
Oh yeah, they
Yeah.
do. Yeah. But I mean, I made a decision to cut that out. And that took a couple of weeks to get it clear, right? And sure, every now and then I'll, still have a whatever it is, ice cream or something, right? You got to let go a little bit here and there. But the other thing is put together a tighter plan for myself. I changed gyms. I got a personal trainer. So I did these things to start moving towards that goal of, look, will I ever look like, Hugh Jackman did in Wolverine? I don't know. But the picture's still up there because you have to have something to shoot for. I mean, it could be maybe it's just abs you want to get, or maybe you just want to lose weight. I don't know, but whatever it is, like the desire is one thing, but then you do have to build a plan, right? So the other thing is like, so let's just take a different situation where like, yeah, where I was writing the book, right? Like my desire to write a book was really strong, but I kept putting it off and procrastinating on doing the actual writing. So I had to come up with a plan for that. And this was like just going back to probably my first book when I wrote that, before I published it. And spent a couple of years writing and getting everything ready. But I had to have a plan every week. And it really, I mean, every day was just showing up and doing like a couple thousand words or whatever. But that became my routine.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started putting in that time, then I had the book ready after a year. But again, it's just showing up, knowing what it is that you got to do and taking action on that. Right. Because you're right. Because the desire for something, you can desire something, but when you wait for motivation to come around, it's just like you might feel motivated every now and then, but that's, that just won't cut it. You have to realize like most of the days I do not feel motivated to go to the gym or write or whatever. Like a lot of these things actually I'd be okay with just putting them off and sitting down on the couch and watching Netflix. But I realize that that's not going to get me what I want, and it's not going to help me to help other people get what they want either. So,
right. That's a good point. Plan, because you need to plan for it and then take actionable steps. Like we talked about compound growth, just take that first step. This show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I love to ask my guests this last question. What is one life lesson that either you learned from someone or you want the audience to learn from your life that you'd like to share as a closing point?
Yeah. So probably one thing that really stuck with me all these years is that, and this is coming back to the planning, Ashley, is like, if you don't have a plan for your life, somebody else does. And when I first heard that, I don't remember offhand who said it, but it's just one of those quotes where it's just very right to the point.
Yeah.
When I first heard that, it bothered me because I was like, I realized when I heard that and I didn't like it. I was like, I do want to have a plan for my life. I want to take control of my destiny. And that was really where like master your destiny. That was really what it was all about. And that's when I started to, move towards that. Then that just became like, I just felt like I was in control of, like the journey. Like I just, instead of somebody else saying, okay, this is what you're doing the rest of your life. Here's how you're going to do it. And you're not going to say anything. And I know like, there's a lot of people in that situation and I have been in that situation, but I realized that I didn't want to be. So I made a switch, or it wasn't really a switch. It was really just a decision. Like I want to master my own life. I want to master my own destiny. I want to become the greatest version of whatever that is, I want to get there. And so that's the one thing that probably just changed everything for me. And it was really just a lot of it comes back to mindset as well. Mindset's one of those things where, your mindset is something again that you can build, right? We have different mindsets for different areas of our lives too. We have a mindset for money. Like money was one of those mindsets. Like the money mindset was my biggest struggle, I think, because up until probably recently, I didn't really confront my scarcity mindset. And I'm coming back to just to wrap it up though, but like the scarcity mindset was the one thing that was always holding me back. And I always knew it was there, but it was such a defining, fearful thing that I didn't want to face it. And when I finally started to face it, I realized, okay, to get beyond this, I need to figure out, what kind of mindset do I want to have? The mindset of abundance, the mindset of wealth, so what does that mean? Again, coming back to the action, building the plan, I got to find out who's talking about money and who's really good at these things. So sure enough, I went on, found some YouTube videos, and then I read a book called Killing Sacred Cows, I think it was. Amazing, right? Like these books are like, again, found some good books and went through like the psychology of money and started reading books on wealth that I'd never really considered before. However, over here, I was building like a 6-7 figure publishing business, and that was my goal. And yet I realized like, yeah, but even if I, like to your point about the lottery winners, even if I got $20 million, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Like that's the thing. And I want to know what to do with it. I don't want to be like relying on someone else to take care of that when that day
Right.
comes.
Right.
And so anyway, so these are just things like recognizing the things that, things that you're good at, but then there's always going to be that one hidden, I'll call it a weakness that you're not going to see until maybe later on in life. And when you do see it, just realize like that could be the one thing that's being, kind of like lying in the darkness, like for me, it was always that thing that I just avoided, which is probably why I always ended up like not having money or being not able to manage it, or worse yet, giving it to other people and hoping that they manage it for me.
Right.
And again,
Right.
to me, that wasn't like mastering my destiny. It was like, you can't have it all over here and then be failing at it over here. And for me, I just wanted to, be able to finally say like, oh yeah, I recognize that was a weakness, but it's also a weakness. That's something that I wanted to get better at, and I knew I could. Right. So again, it was just investing time in that one thing.
That's very powerful, and I honestly feel a parallel when you said that, because I had the same thought process when I started this show 3 years ago. And I even said it on maybe like episode 5. I think we're over 100 episodes now, but it was very early. I remember talking to a guest and telling him that, I would never want to blow up very quickly, right? I wouldn't want the show to gain traction very quickly, because I wouldn't know how to handle that kind of growth. People would have higher expectations. I don't have a team. I don't have anybody. It's just that quick overnight success, which is why you see overnight success artists kind of just have a one-hit wonder or some sort of, short period fame, and then they're gone, is because they didn't have that, build up to become the person that could handle that level of growth. So my whole vision this whole time has been, okay, who do I have to become and what do I have to do to handle that kind of growth? So when the day does come, right, who you are and how to handle it. Just like you had mentioned with getting a large sum of money, you need to first figure out how to handle that and who you have to become to handle that. So,
no, that's interesting. Yeah, I like that, because I'm really like, I feel like I'm impatient. Like, why don't I have all this right now? And I realize like, oh yeah, because something in the universe knows he's not ready for it yet. And when he is ready for it, we're going to give him more of it. And that's actually what's been happening. The more better I get at this, and the more, not patient, but just the more I learn and the more prepared I become, things are growing. Right. But it's, if it had happened to me 20, 30 years ago, I don't know, I just probably would have ended up like, one of those, I don't know, people who just got everything and they just lost it because they went totally nuts, didn't know how to handle it.
Right.
So I would have been one of those people probably. So I don't know, maybe just something's looking out for me, and I'm very grateful for that. But it also reminds me like, okay, just because somebody else had said this again, like just because you don't have it all now doesn't mean you're not going to get it all. And you have to define what that means, by the way. Like, I already have it all, by the way. I've got a great family, and I've got a business, and I've got everything. So I already have it all. So now the question is like, okay, well, how can I, use like this knowledge and this insight and everything to help other people, get to where they want to be? Like, that's become, like, that's my obsession now. Is I want to, to help 100 million people.
Yeah.
That just sets me on fire. So anyway,
Absolutely.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I think I could have gone a little bit deeper with that.
No, that was great. It all boils down to what we've been talking about: goals, plans, and taking that first step. So thank you so much, Scott, for coming onto the show today and sharing some wisdom. I really appreciate it. I know the audience is getting some good gems out of this.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, thank you.